a quiet city where everything seems normal and people live happily, until suddenly an earthquake strikes. At first, everyone thinks it's just a minor tremor, nothing to worry about. But that was merely the calm before the storm, for shortly after, a massive flood and a huge storm begin to wreak havoc, destroying everything in their path. What exactly is happening, and will the people survive this onslaught? That's what we'll find out in today's video. Let's go. The film opens in one of the coastal cities in Norway. We learn that this city is nestled among a range of mountains, a setting where at any moment an earthquake or a landslide could occur and completely obliterate the city, as it has done several times before. We then meet a local resident named Christian, who is on his way home. He lives there with his wife Adine, his little daughter Julia, and his son Sundri. While talking with his family, we discover that they plan to leave the city very soon. The next day, Christian goes to work at the Earthquake Monitoring Center, the facility responsible for watching over the surrounding mountains so that if any tremor occurs, they can immediately alert everyone to evacuate and avoid harm. There, he works alongside his colleagues, his boss Arvid, a woman named Marjut, a man named Jacob, and others. Today is Christian's last day at the center, and everyone is saying their goodbyes. Just as Christian is leaving, an alarm suddenly blares from the control room. Rushing over with his co-workers, they discover that the groundwater level beneath the mountain has dropped dramatically. Christian becomes worried that this could trigger an earthquake or even cause the mountain to collapse. However, Arvid reassures him that the sensors haven't detected any issues, so there's no cause for alarm, and he calms Christian down. The following day, we learn that Christian plans to take his children, Sundri and Julia, and leave the city, while Adine will remain for a few days because of work, and later join them in their new home. So, Christian takes his children and departs, but at the very last moment, he suddenly remembers something. He rushes back to the center, leaving Sundri and Julia waiting in the car outside, and meets with Arvid and the others. He explains that the mountain might collapse, but their equipment isn't showing any signs of a problem because the vibrations may have damaged the cables connected to the sensors, rendering them unable to detect the danger. Convinced by Christian's argument, the team, accompanied by Jacob, descends the mountain to inspect the sensor cables. Their suspicions are confirmed. The cables have indeed been damaged by the mountain's vibrations. Christian and Jakob return and insist that the city must be evacuated immediately, but Arvid refuses, assuring them that nothing will happen and that they'll simply replace the cables with new ones. Frustrated, Christian grows angry but doesn't argue further. He leaves Arvid and the others. He then goes back to the car to pick up his children, only to find they aren't there. Realizing they must be with their mother at the hotel where she works, he sets off to find them. At the hotel, we see that Adine works at the reception desk alongside a co-worker named Vibka. Just then, a couple, Philip and Maria, arrive to check in. It isn't long before Christian reaches the hotel and finds his children waiting. He apologizes for being delayed by work and decides to spend the night there. However, Julia asks that they return to their home for one last night so they can say goodbye to it. Christian agrees, taking Julia with him, while Sundri stays behind at the hotel with Adine, partly because he's quite taken with Vibka and wants to remain near her. The next day, a staff member at the center named Mako notices that one sensor is still active and is picking up unusual movement in the mountain. He quickly calls for Marjut, who then contacts Arvid and Jacob to report the situation. Without wasting a moment, they take Arvid and Jacob and head into the mountain to check for any seismic activity. Meanwhile, Christian is preparing to leave the city. Suddenly, he notices birds abandoning the city in large flocks. This startling sight convinces him that the mountain is about to shake and collapse. After all, birds instinctively flee from places where tremors occur. Immediately, Christian calls Marjut to get more details, and then manages to reach Arvid. He tells Arvid that he must evacuate the mountain at once because the collapse is imminent. Arvid is about to act when all of a sudden, the mountain begins to collapse. In a desperate bid for safety, Arvid unties his rope and secures Jacob with it, but then the mountain gives way. Arvid falls and dies amid the screams and terror of Jacob, who can hardly believe what's happening. Meanwhile, Marjut loses her connection and realizes that the mountain has indeed started to collapse. The devastation spreads quickly, affecting the entire city. Even Christian's own house begins to crumble. Grabbing his daughter Julia to protect her, Christian clutches her tightly. At the hotel, Adine steps outside and immediately notices tremors and soon an earthquake rocks the city. Worried for her son Sundri, Adine rushes out to find him. Along the way, she meets Vibka, who informs her that the mountain has collapsed, which means a powerful flood will hit the city in just a few minutes. They realize they must quickly wake all the hotel guests and evacuate them immediately. Vibka and Adine hurry through the hotel, rousing everyone, including Philip and Maria, to safety. Yet Adine cannot find Sundri anywhere, so she begins searching for him, while Vibka loads the guests onto a bus to get them out of the city for good. At that moment, Maria decides to accompany Adine in the search for Sundri, and of course Philip refuses to leave his wife behind, so he joins them. Then the flood strikes the entire city, battering the hotel and even breaking through its walls. Adine, Maria, and Philip head down into the hotel's basement to search for Sundri, where the water is rising alarmingly fast. Tragically, Maria drowns in a heart-wrenching scene, and neither Adine nor Philip can save her. Undeterred, Adine and Philip continue to search for Sundri until they finally find him in a room. However, the door is locked from the outside, and water is rising so rapidly that it threatens to drown them all. They try desperately to open the door, but their efforts fail, and as the water keeps rising, Philip is overcome with hysteria. He literally goes mad. In his frantic struggle, he ends up pulling both Adine and Sundri underwater in an effort to keep them afloat, but this only results in Adine and Sundri drowning. In a final, desperate moment, Adine manages to overpower Philip, pulling him under to prevent him from harming her or Sundri. Ultimately, Philip too drowns, just like his wife Maria, and so, Adine and Sundri remain trapped in that room, unable to escape. At the same time, we see Christian leaving the city in his car with Julia. The road is jammed with vehicles full of people fleeing the disaster, and the congestion is so severe that the traffic comes to a complete standstill. Realizing that if they remain stuck, the flood will eventually hit them all, Christian jumps out of his car with Julia and starts running along the road, urging everyone to do the same in order to escape. Sure enough, people begin to pour out of their cars and run alongside Christian and Julia as the flood intensifies and draws ever closer. Along the way, Christian encounters a neighboring family, a trio consisting of a father named Thomas, his wife Anna, and their little daughter. He urges them to run with him to escape the chaos. However, disaster strikes when a car collides with Anna. Christian immediately tells Thomas to take his daughter and Julia and flee, while he rushes back to rescue Anna. When he reaches her, he finds that Anna is injured and unable to walk. Determined, Christian helps her into a car for protection and rides alongside her. But as the flood continues to rise, it eventually overtakes them and capsizes their car. After a while, we see Christian in the overturned car, safe, but tragically, Anna has died. Distraught over her loss, Christian leaves her behind and sets off again, searching for Thomas until he finds him together with Julia and Thomas's daughter. Thomas learns that his wife has perished, a revelation that devastates him. Yet Christian, focused on his mission, leaves Julia with Thomas and sets out to find his wife Adine and his son Sundri. Before long, Christian arrives back at the hotel and searches frantically until he finds the room where they are. But the room is completely flooded. Christian wades into the water, manages to retrieve Adine, and brings her to a safe place. Then he dives back in to fetch his son Sundri, successfully rescuing him so he can be reunited with Adine. However, Christian himself soon faints, and for a terrifying moment, Adine and Sundri believe he has died. They struggle to revive him, and fortunately, their efforts pay off. Christian regains consciousness, recovers well, and is joyfully reunited with his family. Despite the overwhelming devastation that has struck the city, the family is relieved and happy simply to be together and safe. And with that hopeful note, the film comes to a close. I hope you enjoyed the film. That's all. Peace.